everyone, welcome back to Blooms and Bicycles. I hope you're having a lovely August so far, and we're really excited to share with you today the Summer Meadow collection. As we move into the latter part of summertime, the wide range of long grasses which in the wild meadows have long been left in peace, grow tall and go to seed to become just as beautiful as the flowers left in bloom. And as they drift from side to side in the warm currents of air, they part to reveal bold splashes of bright primary colours from the natural scatterings of wild flowers, which almost negotiate between themselves for growing space to provide a perfectly balanced ecology and stunning distribution of colours. In today's video, we'll be showing you how to construct the Summer Meadow Teapot letterbox flowers. Today, our teapot is already prepared with the water and the flower feed. However, if you would like to learn how to prepare your water vessel, you can find the link to our flower care video in the description box below. So in today's collection, we'll actually be using the range of different natural grasses to create our grid, which are the Deschampsia in this beautiful tawny colour, the Pennisetum, which has a beautiful texture, the Pennisetum, which is like a long meadow grass, and the Briza, which sounds like crickets. So first we'll take our Deschampsia and we'll just take small clusters at a time, trimming to varying heights, but keeping them relatively short so that the seeds stand close to the opening of the vessel. And this just starts to help build up some volume and some flexible space for the longer stems to sit within. So I'm just going to trim half of this last bundle, a lot shorter than the rest. And we'll position that towards the back. And then with our final pieces, they're a lot taller, but will actually look quite nice stood up probably in the center if we can. Again, it's just about having a play around until the stems tell you where they're happy. It just becomes a process of elimination, really. Trial and error. So now we'll take our first stem of Pennisetum, trimming away on the angle. This will also be a useful stem when building out the grid, as much as the seed head itself. And just repeat the process with the other pieces. So a regular balance is what we always go for. So nothing has to be too structured or too regimented. Next we'll take our longer stems of Pennisetum, and these should now just actually be quite easy to thread into some of the gaps which have been created. So this is where it becomes useful to already have other stems in place, because these are actually quite top heavy, and if there's nothing else actually in the teapot yet, they can topple out quite easily. Whereas as you can see now, they're holding their own. And now we'll take the Briza and we'll just thread this into. And they will start to change colour naturally through the course of their life while in the display. And they'll start to turn from a green to a goldy colour before turning more to a rustic brown. But honestly, observing the lifespan of things like this in its own way is just as charming as watching a flower when it blooms. And we are just going all the way with this wild look. So it really doesn't have to be overly calculated or overly considered. Let nature tell you where it wants to be. One thing also to consider with the Briza, they are so fine, the stems, and they can sometimes bend and snap. But again, that's okay. If you just trim it away where you've actually found the crease, you can still then use the flower head as much as the stem that's left. So now we'll take the most voluminous of stems, which actually in this design are all of the white and all of the yellow flowers. So first of which, we have the White Aster, the Wild Fennel. How spectacular is that? The goldenrods, as well as the White Astrantia. This variety is called Billion Stars. And isn't it funny, because we haven't even finished yet, but how beautiful do all of those grasses just look together in their own right? And I actually feel now quite grudged putting in any extra flowers to the display, but it'll still look beautiful. So first of all, we'll take our yellow stems. We have 3 of these. And as you can see with the Wild Fennel, there are many offshoots that come from the main stem. So it's entirely up to you. You can either work to the magic of 3, as we always talk about, or you could always work to the magic of 5 if you think there is a way of splitting out your Wild Fennel into 3 separate stems. I guess it just depends on how your stem looks. Everyone will be unique. In our case, we'll be going with the 3. And again, we'll just trim those down. And always making sure, as we always say, to remove any leaves which will fall under the watermark. Position 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Now purposely, I am going to make sure that the one on the right is actually a bit taller than the one on the left. Again, just because the varying heights always help keep the eye continually moving throughout the design by offering varying points of interest. And then the yellow Wild Fennel will become the centerpiece. And then we just carefully weave it into the gaps that we can find in the grid. And just allow it to find its own way. So the White Aster, like with the Wild Fennel, has many offshoots from the one stem. So this will be perfect for splitting out into 2 pieces. So it's just about finding a place where it feels like it naturally wants to break away. Again, no hard and fast rules with this, just personal preference is all it's about. So I've literally just cut away any of the offshoots as well as the main stem itself. So now we have 2 clumps. Put 1 clump to one side, and then we'll trim this down. It might mean that you end up with a number of smaller offshoots which actually aren't attached. You can just still keep hold of them and just insert them as one cluster. And now what is starting to happen is the different splashes of colour are starting to emerge through the different shoots of grass, which actually is very close to what you find in a summer meadow. So again, keeping hold of the cluster of stems, because many of those, now that we've trimmed it down to the right size, many of those have now separated. It's not just on one piece anymore. So just keeping hold, just find a place in the grid to thread it into. And we'll keep this one relatively long. So again, we have the graduation of height, starting with tall at the back, going through to shorter at the front. We've cut on the angle as we always do, and now we're just weaving it in. So the next stage is to arrange the candle-shaped stems, which are the Purple Larkspur, the Blue Delphinium, and this beautiful claret-coloured Antirrhinum. And I just love how this blue sits when it's next to the yellow. So now we'll take the Larkspur, and I think this will look nice, positioned on the left. And then we'll add the Antirrhinum. Again, as we always say, with our flower grid, it means that the flowers can sit within the grid and don't necessarily have to go all the way to the bottom of the vase. As long as you do just keep it topped up with water. play around with the angles that the grid allow you to work with. So now that all of the candle shape varieties have gone in, next we'll add in the different varieties of roses. So we actually have a graduation of colours throughout the pink spectrum with each of these, going from a deep fuchsia pink with the garden style rose, to a coral peach, which actually has fuchsia pink in the centre, in a garden spray rose, to a very delicate, almost like a powder pink in the traditional shape rose that you will often find. So again, working with the magic of 3, and just making sure the other stems don't move too much as we introduce them. We'll add our roses, our fuchsia pink roses, in a triangular formation. So again, we'll trim them to different heights. And actually, given the amount of space that we have in this design, I think it's actually quite nice for the flowers to emerge through the different layers of grass and flowers that are now starting to build out. And the good thing about that is it'll help at least the delphinium stay in place. Now we'll take the lighter pink roses and we'll start to create another triangle, because there's 3 of these. And we'll create a triangle which is in the alternative position to the fuchsia pink triangle. So we'll bring this one round the front. So what we're also being mindful of here is making sure that there is enough negative space, or an equal amount of negative space between each of the roses, so none of them look too close together. So I think actually putting this on quite almost a horizontal angle towards the front just positions it in an unexpected way and goes with that wild meadow feel that we're trying to achieve with this design. As the final rose flower, we'll take our coral piece, which is naturally quite short, so putting this towards the front. Again, it's quite happy actually. As I was threading it in, I could feel it starting to sit on top of the grid, not even halfway down the teapot, but that's great because it gives you loads of flexibility with the different angles to play with. So we'll leave that just as it is. That's obviously where it wants to be. So now we'll take our Nigella and we'll position this in the centre in a kind of mirror position to the delphinium. Although it doesn't offer exactly the same pop of colour as the delphinium, it still offers volume and a hue in the blue tones. As you can see, the delphinium was positioned originally in the centre. As we've been adding things in, it just wants to lean off to one side. So that's okay, we'll just go with it. And that's when we use other flowers to work to the advantage of the position the other flower wants to sit in. So now we'll take our cornflowers. So if you want that instant gratification of colour pops running all the way through your design, if you just take a close look at which flowers are actually coming into bloom, in your letterbox flowers you will always receive 3 stems. So if we just look closely at how many flower heads are already in bloom on each of those stems, so for instance with this one, 3 flowers are in bloom on one stem, while 1 flower is in bloom on each of the other 2 stems. So just to be a bit strategic about things and trying to capture that overall balance again, albeit an irregular balance, we'll just position this one with 3 flowers sort of towards the centre and then use the other 2 to go off to the left and right. So using the first stem to create a distribution of colour which balances out the splash of colour offered by the delphinium, we've put this in a mirrored position so it leans off to the right as opposed to the delphinium which is now leaning off to the left. And now we'll just take the other 2 shoots And we'll just weave those in. Lots of the stems in this design are very thin, so they are very fragile. So if you're just mindful about how carefully and gently you start to lower things into that grid, just to be sure that it doesn't snap anything, I guess. Perfect. Giving things a slight twirl can always help. And then positioning this more towards the centre. I think that's looking okay. So now we'll take those remaining pieces of Briza and we'll cut these pieces right down, as these will be used now to dress the opening of the water vessel. And they will also naturally dry out, so they don't necessarily need to have much of a drink of the water. So just making sure that all of your flower heads have gone into the water vessel, because as you arrange from different angles, it can be easy enough for things to just slide out to the other side rather than go into the water. And then as a few final finishing touches, wherever we see some negative spaces, we'll just add the remaining stems of Briza. So the final show-stopping piece to add are these beautiful crimson red dahlias, and the red is as bright as a ladybird. So just being quite strategic about this, just to be sure that we get that even distribution of red running throughout the design. And what you will find is that the dahlias actually come from the flower growers already trimmed down. This happens at the flower growing stage. But what we'll do in this case, so not to disrupt the position of the other flowers in the grid, is we will just snip that away and cut alongside the main stem. So it creates a more seamless piece, which is easier to insert. And this is really where the grid definitely comes into its own. Because if you can achieve some unusual angles with your dahlias by just resting them in place, not forcing them all the way down to the bottom, it will just really add to that design and that effect that we're going for. And I think adding this final one at the back, again, it allows us to work with the magic of 3. I think we'll just adjust where the fuchsia pink roses are. So slightly twirling it from side to side, we gradually lift the stem out of the position. And I think just a pop of fuchsia pink in the centre there, to work alongside the red and really show that graduation of colours, which are now going all the way from the tawnies through to the corals, into the fuchsia pinks, into the more pastel pinks, which gives an unexpected pop of colour that you'd only expect in the wild, then into the crimson reds, which starkly contrast but are still within the same colour palette, and then a spectacular array of different flowers in different shapes and different textures, all in very deep jewel colours. And there you have it, the Summer Meadow Teapot letterbox flowers. I hope you enjoy.